Good morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by FinancialJuice.com with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us this 13th of January 2015. As always, lots happening with the markets this morning. We have a positive, a risk-on trade this morning in the S&P futures, up about 10 handles, just ticked down 9.75 handles this morning to 2032.50. We'll get into the technicals in a few minutes. Oil, the larger story here, down by 1.25, $1.25 at 44.83, $44.86 now on West Texas Intermediate crude. We have the 10-year. We have the 10-year at 1.903. Rather significant moves in the treasuries as well, folks. And the larger story in the treasuries that we've been following is the 30-year at 2.492. Additionally, the U.S. dollar 92.337, higher by 0.359, which means the euro is lower 1.1777, lower by 0.007. So these are the larger entities that we're watching very closely here. Let's get into what we saw yesterday in activity in the markets. We had the Dow Jones lower by 0.54% at 17,640.84. S&P 500 at 2028.26, lower by 0.81%. NASDAQ lower by 0.84% at 4664.71. We certainly had early morning weakness yesterday, but for the remainder of the trading day, we had a relatively tight range for that trading day. So what's on the docket this morning? Certainly oil continues to be in the limelight. Not just in terms of price action, but commentary. The more oil continues to look for a bottom, the more analysts come out of the woodwork, the more opinions are offered where a bottom could be found, and certainly this creates, no doubt creates a potential geopolitical situation. Certainly, we had the prince from Saudi Arabia commenting over the weekend that it wasn't game theory, it was mostly supply, and that's really something that's being discussed more and more. Is it a question of supply? What we're suggesting, it's a combination of situations where it's a question of supply. Certainly we have lower or expected lower growth rates in Europe and other locations such as China. So that's on a demand side. We certainly have excuse me, a plethora of oil here in the U.S. Certain number of papers have been written about that and the impact on specifically shale drillers and the mechanism behind shale drillers. It's really a quicker process to drill. For shale drillers, it came the time came down from 3 to 4 years to really months. So it's a very quick process. So we may see a very quick drop off in activity should oil continue its decline and looking for that bottom. Certainly, from a geopolitical perspective, we're keeping an eye on the Middle East if there's any specific information coming out. We also wanted to mention, we always bring up from a geopolitical perspective, Russia and the Ukraine, and there were certainly some elements of reporting of a squabble, if you will, some activity in the Donetsk region of the Ukraine. That's been a hotbed of activity. So we're certainly keeping an eye on that. And the way to really get your head around that the right way is to understand how the market reacts to certain news. So as that news came out, we really didn't have anything significant happen specifically in the futures market, and that's one of the ways to interpret it, that the market has already internalized fighting and how it's going to react to fighting between Russia and the Ukraine. So I think that's rather important. One of the central themes what we like to do is we line up central themes that we're watching for the trading day and perhaps the quarter, the year, and what to expect in a trading day. And that's something that good traders do all the time, and that's the way to, as we go through specific securities, what sectors may be active, but also what news out there and what more larger activities is taking place that a trader should be aware of for that particular day. So for today, it's a continuation of certain themes that we have been discussing over the last about a week and a half or so. Is this the euro weakness, and that's continuing, the dollar strength, and that's continuing. We'll get into the charts in a little bit, and we are near multi-year highs for the dollar, and I believe yesterday we saw an impact on one of the companies that's being at least commenting that the stronger dollar may impact fourth quarter numbers. Certainly oil weakness is continuing, as we discussed this morning. Where oil stops, we'll take a look at the technicals. You'd really have to go out on a 10-year chart. We'll show that in a bit to really understand where oil could be going and what the implication of that is. Certainly, January 22nd, we're about 9 days away from the ECB meeting, and what will come out of that will certainly be interesting. Certainly, we're continuing to see commentary out of various ECB officials on whether or not QE is coming, what their opinion on it. Also, we're continuing to hear discussion on deflationary risk, and that's, as we have said, has already entered the lexicon of central bankers around the world, and that's something that we are very sensitive to and listening to what they discuss, because in all intents and purposes, folks, deflationary risk is not something that we want to experience. So in about a very short definition, think of it as if prices tomorrow are anticipated to be lower than today, why would you be purchasing today? And that compounds itself on day over day, month over month, and that's that risk of deflation that really there isn't going to be any economic activity, there isn't going to be any flow of money, flow of capital, and that's really Econ 101. That's at the heart of economic activity, and is really the flow of capital. So if you don't get that flow of capital, if you're anticipating prices to be lower tomorrow, you're not going to spend today, and that's critical there. Implications are cataclysmic. Um, the other the other piece of news on a macro level that we're watching rather closely is this Grexit. This is a Greek exit from the euro. Are these folks bluffing? Do we? What's ECB's perspective on this? Will Greeks' debt be reduced to 50%? And if that's the case, how will other countries respond to that? A lot of geopolitical activity, a lot of geopolitical conversations with respect to that. So I think that's not only interesting, there's historic background with that. So due diligence is in order there, and it's fascinating to get that color, get that dynamic behind that. So also, so we talked about Russia, Ukraine, certainly impact of oil on Russia. That's something that we discuss every day, folks, and Russia's not alone. We heard that Venezuela is speaking to OPEC ministers to perhaps put pressure on cutting supply, and really we have not heard anything yet out of that. For this morning, want to go through what we're anticipating to hear from what's on the docket for macroeconomic news in the U.S. This morning, Charles Plosser is speaking at 8 o'clock. He's already begun speaking. Should something come out that's pertinent, we'll certainly let you know. Additionally, see, we had the NFIB Small Business Optimism Index. Also, we're waiting on the JOLTS report at 10 a.m. And the reason we really want to pay special attention to that is not only is it important, it's really it's the fact that Yellen, Janet Yellen, keeps a very close eye on the JOLT reports, and that's that report indicates how quickly an individual is able to find employment should they want to, even if they're working. As something is posted on a job board, for example, how quickly is that job filled, and that circumvents itself to job activity. So Yellen keeps a very, very close eye on that. Also, as always, we're going to see some Treasury auction results. We're anticipating the Treasury budget number. And also, Kocher Lakota speaks this afternoon as well. So what we look for when we see Fed speakers come out, we look for commentary on monetary policy and what they're anticipating. Right now, the hot topic, of course, is when is that first rate hike. And the caveat there is, should we continuously see lower oil prices that has an implication of lower CPI and lower PPI, lower inflation pressure? Will the Fed still stick to that goal of raising rates by midsummer? We certainly had a Fed speaker comment yesterday on the fact that that they are anticipating rate hikes in mid-summer, and that's something that, again, we're keeping an eye on rather closely. We talked about the themes. Let's get into some of the overnight markets this morning. Asia, we are at in Asia. Let's take a look at Asia. Nikkei lower by 0.64%. Hang Seng higher by 0.79%. Shanghai higher by 0.19%. In Europe, we have the FTSE currently higher by 0.47%. CAC in Paris higher by 1.20%. DAX in Germany higher by 1.22%. And the IBEX in Spain is higher by 1.3%. A quick check of the futures. It is we are higher still, a bit of a tick up in the ES and the S&P 500 futures, higher by 13.5 handles at 20.36 even. And we have crude oil now over $45 at $45.24, lower by 83 cents. So a little bit of a rebound in crude oil. So let's take a look at the technicals, if you would. Let's bear with me. Let's find the technicals here, folks. So let's switch to the chart so we can take a look at these technicals. We'll also have the particular verbiage for you on the presentation as well. So what we have here is we have the crude oil at the top portion, and the lower portion we have ES. So we'll start with the ES. Certainly, one of the things that we're keeping an eye on is this kind of a quirky start to the year, if you would. We had a rather negative beginning to the year. It seems to be a little bit of a slight rebound there. So let's go over the specific levels. The levels that we're watching rather closely here are the 2045 level and the 2052, and we'll close in on that a bit. So we're looking at the 2045 as resistance. Then we have the 2052. Above the 2052, we can come up to the 2063 level, right above here. On the support side, certainly, we always look at the recent high, and so certainly that's 2088. We can also that's above that 2063 level. On the support side, we have the 2032, 2034 level, and we have the 2023 level should that fall below the 2032 level. And certainly the 2000 is both a psychological and an important level technically as well. Let's move on to the crude oil numbers. So one of the things that we've seen as we have been talking about is this precipitous decline in crude. So one of the dynamics that we've been picking up is the fact that as crude is continuing its decline, at times it seems as though it's finding a little bit of a bottom, and then not. And then it breaks lower. And this is that dynamic where what we look for, if you look at the top portion of your screen here, is this hike in volume. Although we did have a little bit of a spike in volume here, we do have a little bit lower volume there, and then an increase in volume, not a huge amount on the downside. We'll see what happens today. And one of the things that we look for here, folks, is capitulation. What is capitulation? When you have a large downdraft, when you have a large decrease in price, and perhaps you find a bottom, and then what happens? Is have a huge increase, a increase in price. There's buyers coming in on very large volumes. So you basically have a confirmation of a bottom. And that's something that we want to take a look at and see if that happens. If we don't see that happening, the thought process is that we're going to continue, perhaps slowly, a slow decline in these particularly in crude, and that's something that we are monitoring rather closely. One of the things that we want to take a look at, and this is something that we absolutely recommend doing, is if you take a look at the 10-year 1 week, and this is something, and then you zero in on this range here, folks. This is a 2-year range. So you see a particular decline, and let's see here. So if you take a look here, we have a low 33.20, obviously. We have, let's see here. So really what we take a look at, if we zero in on this area here as well, we can say, at least theorize that really once we go below that, and if we stay significantly below that 45, we could easily get into that low 40s, upper 39 number, folks, and that's the larger story here. How low can oil go on this? And that's something that's and folks, we've mentioned this before. There's a lot of analysts that are talking, should oil find a bottom, it's going to be a great opportunity to get into the bottom. We're not saying that it's not, but the opposite piece of this is really understanding what's your risk, folks. If you start to nibble on oil now, or oil-related stocks now, what is your downside? Clearly, it's a very trading 101 here, folks. But you want to make sure you forgive the expression, have your wits about you a bit, as you're, even if you're thinking about trading these particular entities here. So let's move on to a few other things. Let's pull up the VIX quickly here. It's really been, we're going to pull up the daily here again. And what we have here, if you take a look at these spikes, we have continued spikes that go above that 20 mark and then below, above the 20 mark and below. So if you look at, even if you take a step back and take a look at this chart from a longer view perspective, we do have, spikes and go below that 16, 18 level. So really that 20 level is that resistance, and we had a little bit of a spike yesterday, right at that 20, just above that 2034. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on, certainly with the markets up. Now the ES is, the futures are up 14 and a half handles. So that's something that's we're monitoring very closely here. So again, we'll see how the market progresses as we prepare for the open in just under 8 minutes. So let's get into gold. We've been discussing gold in this level of 2,000. We have, if you take a look at the daily here, we have seen that perhaps does gold want to build a little bit of a support. Certainly now 1,200 is a support. Is that a level that it wants to hold? We'll certainly see here. We mentioned the 1,200 over and over again. 1223 was a level as well, broke that. So that's something that we're monitoring rather closely. Now, one of the larger stories here that we've been following is this DXY, folks. This is the dollar index versus 10 other currencies across the globe. Now, on that end, we wanted to bring this in here. Deutsche Bank coming out commenting on the U.S. dollar euro parity. We've mentioned this notion a few days ago, so we've been a little bit out in front on this. They see U.S. dollar euro parity in 2016, and also lowers euro year-end forecast to a dollar 1.10 from 1.15. The euro currently at the 1.17 handle at 1.1777. U.S. dollar at 92.334. Folks, we had about a few days ago, we had that 92.525 high. If we go from let's see here. If we go from the 10-year, again weekly, we can take a look at that most recent high of 92.63 levels. So that's something that we are monitoring rather closely, and then we're nearing ever so closely to that. If we take a look again at that dollar at the daily chart there, are we creating a top there? So clearly that 92.528 level is a resistance. We'll see if that can break that. If it can break that, if it can go through that, we're looking at the 92.63 level. So that's what we have for technical analysis. What we'd like to do now is to get into back into the presentation, take a look at which stocks are moving this morning. And let's go through. Let's see. Let's go through the syndicates this morning. We have a few here to go through, and they tend to, again, syndicates tend to be dilutive effect for the particular securities. Excuse me. Tend to be dilutive effect for the particular securities initially, but not always. So, we always like to take a look at them, and as we prepare for the opening of trading. And that's let's take a look here. ADK, we have AdCare files 100 million mixed security shelf for 313,000 shares for holders. AIV files to sell 8.2 million shares of common stock. AIV currently at, we'll take a look at this on this morning, currently at $38.84. BRG, we have files to sell 4 million shares of common stock. We have so nothing yet currently in pre-market. I'm sorry, that's BRG. Nothing yet in pre-market currently. BRX, Bricksmore Property, currently at $25.74. We have 17.5 shares of common stock for holders. In Burlington Stores, BURL, we have currently indicating $48.80 in pre-market. Again, just about to open. We have Burlington Stores to offer 12.5 million shares for holders. Franklin Street files automatic mixed security shelf. We'll take a look at FSP. Franklin Street, bear with us as we're getting this information. Nothing yet in pre-market. Again, for those of you who are new to secondaries and syndicates, a mixed security shelf is something that is a combination of common preferreds, convertibles, and could be even fixed income securities in order to get funding, to raise capital. It could be used for various purposes, including R&D, specifically for on the biotech side. Speaking of, so take a look at PRTK, Paratech Pharmaceuticals, files to sell $200 million worth of common stock. We do not have anything yet for in pre-market this morning yet. Again, almost at the open here uh, in New York. Excuse me. Top insider transactions. We'll take a look at. Um, let's see here, Ernstad Biddle. Let's see, we have a $761,000 purchase. We don't have anything yet for pre-market in UBA. CLR, Continental Resources, currently indicating at $34.97. We have William B. Berry purchasing 600,000 shares of the security. Again, this is the $34.97. Remember, this is the Harold Ham story, where he was one of the individuals that was indicating that he got out or sold out of his hedge for and basically indicated that there was going to be oil was not going to go lower. Clearly, there we have the opening bell. In New York, but in CLR. So that's a very interesting story there, and you can certainly read about it. It's almost a soap opera type situation with a divorce, with a lower stock price. The gentleman certainly lost or currently at least on. I don't know if he realized it or unrealized the loss yet, but certainly a king's ransom, if you will, of a loss on that position. CLMS CLMS, Calamos Asset Management. We have $330,000 purchase. We have this morning the stock at $12.70. Excuse me, $12.67, higher by about 2.5% in the particular security. AFAM, almost family, higher by 0.8%, currently at $30 and a penny. So let's take a brief look again at the ES futures, the S&P futures this morning, higher by 17 and a half handles at 2039.75. Crude oil lower by 62 cents at $45.52. We're paying very close attention to the yields, folks. We have this last slide here that we want to take you through here, and that's the 5-year at 1.406. The 10-year at 1.940, and the let's see here, and 2.527% on the 30-year, and that's something that we are again keeping a very close eye on. A lot of conversation is as last year, folks, and this is very important here, is the fact that a lot of folks presented cases for higher yields by the end of 2014, and they were spot on wrong. And again, a lot of folks are predicting higher rates, specifically in the 10 and 30-year yields, and that is absolutely, and so we'll see how this progresses. So one of the things that we have, the 5-year, again, currently lower than we were a month ago, if you remember correctly, at 1.51%. We were almost at the 1.61 level in the 5-year. The 10-year, again, lower than we were that a month ago, almost 100 basis points lower than we were a year ago on the 10-year and on the 30-year. What a whopper here. The 30 here currently at 2.527, and we were a year ago at 3.77. Now remember, going even further out, we were near 4% on the 30 years, so we're 150 basis points away from more than a year ago. That is just staggering bid that we have. Remember, it's inversely related. The higher the price, the lower the yield. Clearly, money is coming into the debt securities, the treasuries of the U.S. So that's something we are keeping an eye on rather closely. Again, quick check. Futures are higher now by 22 and a quarter. Handles at 20.44. So very strong risk on trade in the ES. Real tick up here within the last few minutes, folks, in the S&P 500. So, folks, we thank you for listening to us this morning. Certainly a lot happening. Keeping an eye on oil, keeping an eye on the futures, and specifically on the dollar index versus the euro, and the implication of that on a global level. And also these yields, folks. Don't forget the yields. They're absolutely critical. Tend to be a bastion of strength, and a bastion of kind of a last resort, or a pillar of strength, if you will, in the world. So thank you for listening to us. Unusual Activity, powered by Financial Juice, with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Have a great day and good hunting.